specifically as engineers, we often get the technical communication part of our professional work extremely wrong. Today, I am extremely privileged to have a professor who is within the field of how humans and machine interact within the communication, specifically in technical terms. I'm very excited for this conversation. And more importantly, I'm excited about the value that we will be adding to those who are interested in the topic. And this is, again, another episode of MoloMolo African Tech Stories. Let's go. So today I have an interesting professor who will give a bit of detail. I will let him introduce himself. This is a prof. This is our first time we have a professor on the show, Molo Molo. It is exciting because he has taken the liberty of his time to speak to us. So without further ado, Prof. Bengler, can you say hello and introduce a bit about yourself and who you are?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction and the kind invitation. And oh, it's a privilege. I heard I'm the first professor on your talk. So thanks again for the invitation. My name is Klaus Bengler, and I'm a professor on ergonomics, or sometimes called human factors, at Technical University of Munich. And I did my studies in psychology, and now my chair is located in mechanical engineering. So we do a lot of work on automated cars, human-robot interaction, how to use and adapt this technology to our all-day life, and we make it usable for the different users, user types, and the different usage scenarios, like say. And what we see is that technology gets more and more advanced, of course. Uh, Technology gets more and more exciting for the users, but on the other hand, also more and more difficult to be explained. So I think my background in psychology helps to understand user needs, and on the other hand, to design technology so it gets usable and intuitive for the users.
Nice. And what, just out of interest, what brought you to this field? How did you end up over the years finding a passion in specifically this type of field?
Yeah. So as said, I started in psychology, and this was one of I did psychology in a time where there was another wave of artificial intelligence and computing power came in. So a lot of things were doable, and it was interesting for me and also to learn from my professors how human cognition works and how technical design and functioning can be designed, can be created, so it fits the human mechanisms of information processing. And then I came in touch with companies like Philips, and they worked on their first mobile phone. And so the question was how to use those phones while driving, for example. I worked for a long time with BMW, and the question was also how to make navigation systems usable for users. And I did my PhD on navigation systems. So it was a crazy situation because uh, I think you are, as can be seen, younger than I am.
There's no way.
But
I cannot tell.
well, there was a time where GPS got into place, and CD as a mass storage was available, and also screens could be placed into cars. So you had all the ingredients to make a navigation system, which is quite usual now in cars. But the big question was then, oh, isn't it this too distracting? So how to design the information, when to talk to the user, how to show the maps, to make it really usable and not distracting while driving. So this was my PhD, and then yeah, step by step, I think I get more and more into this community. And in 2009, I moved to the Technical University to the chair of economics.
Very, very cool. I mean, how would you say your research, I think, shapes the understanding of technical communication? How would you basically describe to a layman person what is technical communication?
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing because so what does it mean if you say communication? The question is whom to communicate to. And what we see is if you make let's take a complex system like a smartphone or a vehicle or something for your household. So you could do technical communication, and this is from expert to expert. And this is what engineers love to do, to talk about all the efficiency, the technical details, the power, and what how it's functioning in detail, all the bits and pieces. This is technical communication, I would say, from expert to expert. What we see, this is in most of the cases not helpful for if you do technical communication to the user, to what we call the end user.
Yeah.
So these people have what we call a totally different mental model. I give you some examples in a minute, and I think technical communication has to be kind of be translated if you talk to a layman, like you say, if you talk to the end user. To some degree, they need to know about technical details, like what are the interfaces, what are the do's and don'ts, so not to crash the thing, and how to use it right and what to use it for. So what we see is if you do technical communication for the end user and you want to have an informed user, you need to use the right terms. The terms have to correspond to the look and feel, and they have to belong to the vocabulary of the user. Uh, so there is an interesting anecdote, which I think it comes from decades ago. But engineers talk to users over menu. Uh, and in the beginning, when people were not so familiar with Windows and smartphones were not in place, a lot of users said, "What is the guy talking about? I didn't want to order something to eat. So what is this menu thing?" Uh, so meanwhile, I think menu is a quite popular term. So people know a menu is a set of functionalities you can select by touch or other mechanisms. So it's now in our knowledge. But there were times, I tell you, where people said, not eating and drinking, phoning.
Yeah, I
Imagine. So another example is because I was talking about navigation systems, and for a lot of users, I think how GPS works is still a black box. So that something can be located by satellites and so on. Mhm. So if you know how it works, I think you understand why your navigation system sometimes works perfectly and sometimes gets a little bit disoriented. Because if no satellite is visible, no GPS. Mhm. So I think this is currently the big challenge because systems get more and more networked. And uh, so, what's the level of detail people need to understand? What's the bug? What's the feature? Why does it work? How to improve it? Um, and so technical communication to come to the end, I think is also, I think the finest way of technical communication is the product itself. Like design says, so form follows function. So what we always try to do is to say how it looks like, how it is shaped, it tells you how it wants to be used. And there is a term which is called affordance. So everything was kind of affordance, how you should grab it, how you could use it, whether it's alive or it's in idle mode. And I think that's really where ergonomics and design come together.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of putting it. I mean, part of one of the service offerings that at MoloMolo we are starting to give to young engineers and sometimes established engineers is just understanding how important technical communication is. It's
Hmm.
it's incredibly important to not only be able to explain a specific product for yourself or for people who have the same mental picture as you, but it's so much more important for you to have a good enough understanding of the product to explain it to someone who doesn't have your vocabulary, who essentially was not in the design cycles. He was not in PDR and CDR and has all the. I mean, he couldn't care less about those things. He just wants to know, like you said, what does it do, right? Can I use it, and what should I watch out for, if anything? Um,
Yeah.
and 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 in a way, this is probably my next question, because in my experience, engineers struggle when they have to now simplify their language for the sake of effective communication to the customer. What are some of the roadblocks you would say for engineers or highly technical people who are entrenched in design, but then have to, change their language for even not even customers, project managers, or even line managers who wants to just understand the bottom line? What are some of the things that you feel engineers kind of struggle with, and how have you found it to be resolved?
I think it's really a challenge because communication is such a funny thing. So we as humans, I think we are really well trained, or for us, it's really usual to adapt to the person we are talking to. So we change our language, our vocabulary, the speed of talking, depending on whom we are talking to. I think it's really, let's say, it's a challenge for somebody doing engineering, because your all day business, as I think an engineer is, to get really in detail. If you do a product, to get into extreme, and you have to use your technical language to talk to your colleagues in an interdisciplinary team, for example, to get the product running, to get it done. So this is your language, that's your mental model. If now you look to a company which provides a product, there is another department that is communicating to the customer, doing the advertisements, doing all the communication. So what they normally do is they translate the technical design to common language. So in all day business, it's not the task of the engineer to do this translation. So it's really an exercise. And normally, I think engineering also does not start for engineers with the customer. It starts with technical facts and also technical enablers. So what I recommend to engineering is to go out to the customers, so to get a deep dive into the customer's life. So listen to their language. So I think it's kind of a translation exercise, and normally, yeah, the engineer is only from time to time talking to the customer. So I think that's to simply it's the point to raise awareness. Oh, stop, break. You're currently talking to another community. I think another problem could be if you switch your language, if you simplify your language. You, it might give the feeling you're not an expert. So I needed it. I think it needs a lot of confidence in your expertise to say, I could explain it much more complicated, but I try to say it in your words. I think it's part of confidence, not to lose all your expertise. Seemingly, yeah.
I need to, what you just said, I need to speak to the audience who usually watches this podcast or listens to it, because what you just said is so important. And this is also something that I honestly believe in. So I will try and at least give also my words on this. So I think one thing that is so crucial about what you said is, as an engineer, your level of competence does not diminish by how simple you communicate. You don't suddenly become a poor engineer because you use simple language. I would even argue that the engineer who's able to adapt to different audiences and are able to get the same decision making specifically at a customer level or at a project manager or chief engineer level, your ability to be able to simplify that language for the sake of action and decision making is the major differentiator in terms of career. I've seen it time and time and again. I don't know how you've seen it, Prof, but this is for me is so crucial because I've seen it where engineers get so stressed out. They get so
Yeah.
stressed out
Yeah.
about, wow, how can't you understand? I mean, it's obvious. Like it's MATLAB. I mean, come on. I mean, it's obvious. And you're thinking, no, it's not obvious.
Yeah. I think there is maybe two other aspects. Uh, I think it's easier. For example, if somebody who knows you quite well and knows you're an excellent engineer and asks the question, could you explain to me in simple words how this and that works? I think you don't lose your competence. The person knows you, you know the person, everything done. If you talk to a huge community in simple words, let's call it simple words or understandable words, um, yeah, people might not be able to discriminate. Is he really the expert for this topic, or isn't he able to know the details? And another thing I think what I watch or what comes to my mind is engineers I think have to be very careful. Also, I in some relation have to be careful. If I simplify things, it might come to the area of what we call misuse or disuse. So if we simplify technical things like um, how to give you an example. So, for example, on car usage, so I say if you switch the system on, it avoids collision, for example, with pedestrians. That's a very simple sentence. And I think it's a quite simple logic. You switch it on and no collision with pedestrians. But in the end, the sentence might be very simple and easy to understand, but it's not true
Mm.
because the full truth is, yeah, if you switch it on, it avoids collision with pedestrians in most of the cases or under certain conditions. Now, if the weather is fine and here and there and so on. So in some occasions, I think engineers have to be careful not to oversimplify because then people overtrust, for example. I think there is this there is this nice story of the cat in the micro oven. Yeah, you know. So yeah, the simple message on a microwave is you can heat up things and also you could dry things. So somebody pushed an animal in there and switched it on. Uh, so what I want to say, the message is too simplified.
Yeah.
I think things can get dangerous if the product is not intelligent enough
Very good
um,
point.
to warn the user. So that's a thin red line, I think, and that is makes some sentences complicated. Then, yeah,
Yeah, which leads me, I think, to a very good point because I do think there should be a balance for sure. And I think that leads me to something that I've seen, especially working for international companies. And I want to take your viewpoint on this. Think how do you think cultural and linguistic diversity impact technical communication? And what I mean by cultural, I mean, uh, not necessarily within Germany. I think German culture in general is maybe from a little bit of dialect here and there. Pretty everybody pretty much can understand each other, to most extent, right? I mean, I know. I've lived here long enough to know also a very simplistic way of putting things. But I'm talking really extremes, right? Where you have internationals who speak fundamentally, I don't know, Portuguese, or
Hmm.
even their level of English is also not at a very high technical, because it's their second language or whatever
Hmm.
it may be.
Yeah.
So how do you see cultural and linguistic diversity impacting technical communication?
Yeah, but I think there is what we see is there is real cultural differences how to communicate technologies. So I think there is. You talk about Germany. I think in Germany it's a very objective, very technical a way of communication. A lot of many facts. And sometimes also very scientific or seemingly scientific, so very objective. What we see in other cultures, like in Asia, and also in the United States, that there is much more, let's say, emotion and much more subjective communication around technical things. Uh, one one intercultural difference: how to communicate technical achievements and innovations. So in Germany, I think it's very distinct, very objective, very calm, to get trust. In other cultures, there is sometimes, I think, much more enthusiasm. That's one thing, which I think is important to win the attention of your communication partner. Um, and another thing is, and that's really true. I think it's a huge challenge to find correct words to bridge the language gap. So how to communicate? How could communicate to non-native speakers, or how to translate typical terms to other languages and avoid miscommunication. I so minutes ago I talked about menu, which is a quite popular term, and it's not a German word, menu, and how to use it right in other languages, so to have the correct context. That's, I think, really a challenge, and we see this because a lot of products use icons, and they use yeah, wordings and explanations. And it's a real challenge to do this, what we call localization and globalization, to avoid misunderstandings. There is an interesting anecdote. For, I think there is a nice icon which is used all over the place for freezing, which is the how do you call it, the snowflake.
Correct.
Snowflake or an ice crystal. And I heard about an investigation where I think it was a producer of HVACs, so climatization, simply used this symbol without any wording on a button. And simply for most of people, it's clear if you push this, something gets cold. And they used it in a region where people never see snow. Yeah. It's so a question. Also, people say, what is it? Uh, uh, so what I recommend to my students is, and lots of engineers and young engineers are there, is go to the people. So get out, get out of the laboratory, and dive into the context, into the usage context, and try to understand uh, So what people use, what people are looking for with your product, and which terms they use, simply get a better understanding, yeah, how to get integrated with your product into their life cycle or their daily life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is such a very, very good point because yeah, as engineers, we like you said, right? We are so consumed, and we in a way we have to, right? We have to be consumed in order to achieve a very technically challenging solution with all sorts of requirements, which oftentimes are flown down from the user that you've never spoken to, or supposedly that is what the user wants. So it's definitely a very, very good point that you made. Now, the one thing that I wanted you to give us some visibility on as we get closer to the end is what are some trends, maybe from your research or at least what you've been witnessing regarding overall man human or man machine interactions for that impacts technical communication, especially maybe with AI or digitization? What are some things that you feel like this is where we need to be thinking as engineers, as scientists? What are some of the things that you've at least starting to see emerging?
And I think one thing is obvious, there is AI all over the place. I think in your job, in my job. So, and this leads what I see to an increase of the communication, and because if you look to former products, I think they reacted on user input. So the user initiated kind of communication, and the artifact technology responded. So it worked, or it started to work, or something, which is kind of communication. And the mechanisms were, let's say, more or less simple, understandable, learnable. I think what we face since now some years is that communication is initiated by the product. So machines and technology gets more and more initiative, opens the dialogue, um, and it and in many cases is able to understand the user and weird questions of users. Mhm. So the expectations of users into communications are meanwhile huge. So you can ask a question and you expect an answer, and the answer is not a human answer. It's a technical system is providing the information. I think that's a big achievement, because you don't need an operator or something. You can talk to your product, which could help. But this should not be, I think, plan B for bad design. So to say, we don't have to care on intuitive user interfaces because users always can ask. So what users have to do is to engage in their tasks, but not engaging in questions and how to understand.
Yeah.
A second thing, what we observe is besides AI, many things are meanwhile working in a network mode. So let's take our communication. I'm using a computer which is connected to my home network via Wi-Fi, which uses a software and which is connected to you, and so on and so on. Now the question, if our communication would break down, so for example, you wouldn't hear me anymore, what could be the reason? Now, it could be the microphone, it could be my Wi-Fi, it could be on your side. So what we say is that we need better explanations in where things get shaky or things go wrong, because users are not able anymore to recover those situations. So why doesn't it work anymore? And so sometimes it's just a cable. It's sometimes it's an easy explanation in a highly networked system. And we see this not only in the private area, we see more and more in working situations, manufacturing, and so on and so on. So users are currently confused if things get out of order, how to recover. Now you could say they need more technical communication and explanation, but how to explain a network manufacturing system to a worker in a certain workstation. So this is, I think, a huge challenge that the what we normally call the machine is mean by much bigger and networked and has much more initiative uh, through AI. So a lot of power. So really complex machines.
Yeah.
Well, so what's to come? So what's to come? I think a lot of interesting solutions, highly adaptable, um, and a lot of work for human factors still. So we will not run out of work.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing to hear that at least. I mean, part of my work, especially as a when I interact with pilots, is human factors, right? It's
Mhm.
understanding what are we providing as first first layer of input that will make them be able to control a very complex and a network of systems that they
Yeah,
don't necessarily have the capacity to understand each component in its detail, and they shouldn't. So it's a very very good point. What you
yeah.
mentioned. Awesome. So Prof, I really wanted us to maybe end with very one simple question, which I usually ask most of my guests, but since you're a professor and you are the first one, you're the one. Um, what? How would you, if you were to put yourself in 50 years time? If, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, you live that long. Um, what are some of the things you would look forward to in terms of outputs from your research? What would you say?
Oh, that's a good question. So what I would love to see is that we still appreciate physical things. So we still put effort in making things feelable, haptic, and giving them a haptic quality because I think we need this as humans. So to have a physical environment, and not only digital. Um, what I also would love to see is that, s- and that's I think a tricky game. Will be a tricky game. I would love to see some of my technical systems and technical devices to adapt to my style of living. So I would like to see that a product that I owned 5 years or 10 years, it adapted to me and my habits. And other products I love because they do not change. So they keep their character and stay the same. I think everyone has such things in his or her belongings to say it it is as it is, and this is what I like it for. Maybe sometimes it's pencils or I don't know what. And from some things I really expect that they change to suit my style of living. For example, a smartphone or sometimes a notebook I don't want to configure. I would expect it changes with my daily life. Yeah. And so there will be two groups of products, things that change and others that shouldn't change. And I would love to see much more physical and material and intelligent materials in the future. And I did some calculation. It would be so 50 years plus. Oh man, I really would be old.
Don't keep those calculations in your head.
Okay.
Uh, Prof. Prof. Bengler, thank you so much for
Yeah.
this amazing conversation. Very candid. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I really hope that we will be able to have something like this again. As you know, I am passionate about technical communication, giving people an ability to be empowered by empowering their speech, specifically engineers. So I'm really grateful for this time with us. And there you have it, another amazing episode with Prof. Bengler, an expert in the field of technical communication, who gave us incredible nuggets of what it means to be technically adept, to also be sensitive to the fact that the world is changing and that we, as engineers, as scientists, as people who care about technology, we should truly be conscious of the trends and but more importantly, the humanness that needs to remain at the center of all our interactions. I'm Dr. PK. Thank you so much for watching another episode of MoloMolo African Tech Stories. Until next time, ciao.